Seeing it's 6:12, I'd like to call the August 4th, 2021 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council order. And would ask that if you're able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Councilmember Petty,
Here.
Councilmember Nackstedt,
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Here.
Councilmember Winger,
Present.
Councilmember Askin. Here. Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Foster, can I get you to close the door for right now? Thank you. Next up, we have agenda approval. Vice Mayor Malloy.
And is there anything that you
Oh,
would like to
yeah,
add to the
sorry.
packet?
Yeah, a little distracted
problem.
there. Sorry, before we get to agenda approval, council, you should have a lay down in front of you that I'd like to draw your attention to. With requested additions to the packet, action, add to item D1, ordinance number 3221-2021, plat map requested by the city manager. Action, add to item D2, ordinance number 3222-2021, plat map requested by the city manager. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested additions to the packet listed by the mayor and request unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Nackstedt.
Thank you. I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent.
Object?
Yes. Is there anybody, Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes, Mayor. What I would like to do is from the consent agenda, move item G2, which involves the bills over $15,000, and move it to the general orders and perhaps suggest it goes in slot D6.
It'll be on the agenda under G2, but it'll be in the order that it's in.
Thank you.
But it'll be pulled from the consent onto the agenda. Is there any other members of the body that would like to amend or change the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please read the consent agenda into the record?
I apologize. Somebody second that motion.
Oh,
I'll
Did we-
second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approval of regular meeting minutes of July 7th, 2021. Approval of bills to be ratified brought forth by administration. Approval of non-objection to marijuana license renewals for Red Run Cannabis Company, LLC, Red Run Cannabis Cultivators, LLC, and Cook Inlet Cannabis Company, brought forth by the city clerk. Approval of a special use permit to Kenai Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center for Moose Meat John Cabin, brought forth by administration. Introduction of ordinance number 3226-2021, increasing fiscal year 2021 estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, police department, and accepting a grant from the Alaska High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area for drug investigation overtime expenditures, brought forth by administration, with a public hearing on August 18th. Introduction of ordinance number 3227-2021, accepting and appropriating a grant from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security passed through the State of Alaska Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, fire department, and authorizing the sole source purchase of portable radios and accessories for the fire department, brought forth by administration, with a public hearing on August 18th. Introduction of ordinance number 3228-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund, terminal repair and maintenance department for expenditures in excess of budgeted amounts related to damage to terminal building siding, and authorizing a purchase order to Blazy Construction, Inc., brought forth by administration, with a public hearing on August 18th. Introduction of ordinance number 3229-2021, accepting a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport snow removal equipment capital project fund, brought forth by administration, with a public hearing on August 18th. Introduction of ordinance number 3230-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund fire department for the purchase of extrication equipment needed to provide emergency response to motor vehicle accidents, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on August 18th. Introduction of ordinance number 3231-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the COVID-19 CARES Act Recovery Fund for a federal CARES Act grant passed through the State of Alaska Department of Public Safety for overtime and indirect expenditures of the police, fire, and communications departments of the city, with a public hearing on August 18th. And introduction of ordinance number 3232-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, Kenai Fine Arts Center Capital Project Fund, and amending the lease for a portion of Lot 3, Block 17, original town site of Kenai for the Kenai Fine Arts Center to provide additional funding for improvements and modifications, amendment to the lease for the Kenai Fine Arts Center, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on August 18th. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda at this time, which was just read into the record? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Any discussion from council? Any objection to approval? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved with the exception of action item G2, or action approval, rather G2. This evening, we have no scheduled public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. Item D1, ordinance number 3221-2021, determining that real property described as Lot 4A, Block 3, Cook Inlet Industrial Air Park 2014 replat, according to plat number 2014-21, city-owned airport land located outside the airport reserve is not needed for a public purpose, and authorizing the sale of the property to Schilling Rentals, an Alaska partnership. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3221-2021.
A second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3221-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that there's a memorandum recommending an amendment to add an 8th whereas clause regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission approval. So maybe I'll go ahead and
Yes,
do that.
would you
do
please?
that before there's other comment?
Yeah, no, that'd be more.
Okay. So I would move to add as the 8th whereas the following. Whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended council approve that the subject property is not needed for public purpose and authorizing its sale at their meeting on July 14, 2021, and.
Is there a second? Discussion on the amendment?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Councilmember Nexa.
Not in the true content of it. I actually had a minor amendment to that. It actually, what that states is that the planning and zoning is authorizing it. So what I think that the only change would be to change the word authorizing to authorize.
So an amendment to the
That would be the
amendment?
amendment.
Very good.
I'll second.
I can accept that as an amendment to the main motion.
Yes.
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Now we're back to the original main motion amendment. Is there any objection to that? I think unanimous consent was requested. Seeing none, that amendment is approved. So we now have ordinance number 3221-2021 as amended for us.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
For ordinances, if it involves funds, do we have to call the roll or not?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you.
For ordinances. Yep. Any discussion, any further discussion on ordinance number 3221-2021? Councilmember Naxton.
I just wanted to say that on behalf of the airport, it's appreciated having a leaseholder paying funds for the last 54 years, whatever it has been, but the lease is about to terminate anyway, and the leaseholder has improved the properties appropriately, and it is it's time for the property to go into private hands. So I'm going to definitely support this ordinance.
Councilmember, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, and I concur with Councilmember Naxted. And this was a property that went through quite a process as far as transition from lease status to private ownership with an exit strategy, support the outcome that we have here tonight.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I would just like to add that I concur with the comments of my colleagues up here, and I'm glad to see that this, I think, was, as far as the leaseholders, probably their ultimate, outcome that they'd like to see, and would also like to just point out the substantial improvements that they made to this property to get it where it is today. So I will be supporting this also. Councilmember Glendenning, or Councilmember Glenis.
Yes, thank you. I too will be supporting this, and it's been quite evident of the improvements on this property, which enhance the beauty of our city, and I graciously appreciate them being in our community and providing opportunities for citizens in our community. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes?
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now on ordinance number 322-2021, determining that real property described as Lot 1A, Block 1, Deshka subdivision, according to plat number. Do you want to take an at ease? Okay, let's take a 5-minute at ease. Thank you. To call our meeting back to order. We're on item D2, ordinance number 3222-2021, determining that real property described as Lot 1A, Block 1, Deschka subdivision, according to plat number K-1577, city-owned airport land located outside the airport reserve is not needed for a public purpose, and authorizing the sale of the property to Schilling Rentals, 2016 LLC. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. Mayor, I move to enact ordinance 3222-2021.
I'll second.
Is there anybody from the public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3222-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. And again, there's a requested amendment to this ordinance, so, Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I'll read from the clerk's handwriting. I move to add, so the third, whichever whereas.
Eighth whereas.
Section 8?
Eighth whereas.
Eighth whereas. That's not, I'm sorry. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended council approve that the subject property is not needed for public purpose and authorize its sale at their meeting on July 14th, 2021, and
I'll second that.
request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the amendment is approved. So now we have before us ordinance number 3222-2021 as amended. Comments, delivery? 3222, that's what I thought. 2021. Any further discussion? I guess I'll just reference my previous comments for ordinance number 3221-2021. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, council. We're on item D3, ordinance number 3223, ordinance number -2021, increasing fiscal year 2021 estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, police department, and accepting a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation passed through the state of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for public enforcement overtime expenditures. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor.
I move
Oh,
we enact ordinance 3223-2021. I'll second.
thank you. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3223-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments, deliberation from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We're on item D4, council ordinance number 3224, 2021, repealing and reenacting Kenai Municipal Code Title VI elections to provide clarity, housekeeping, and process improvements. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 32241, 2021.
Second?
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3224-2021? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Appreciate the city clerk working with me, primarily her product, to develop this proposed election code. And as we know, election code is very important to our voters. This is a repeal and a replacement with a new code that makes some changes to our election procedures. And council may have a lot of questions about this, as may our voters. So this ordinance would be appropriate for a work session. Also, council may have some other information that they'd like to get, for a work session. So that would involve a postponement of the ordinance after discussion and maybe questions and everything tonight to another date for a work session, that the public could attend, like the very good work session we had earlier this evening. And then there would also be a postponement to another date certain for a second public hearing. But, this is, there was a previous proposed ordinance last year that was more ambitious than this ordinance, and that didn't go forward because of the vote that occurred, on the ballot proposition later. And this one is simpler than that. There's, no voting centers and stuff like that. It retains all our precincts. Part of this new code is that we would be looking at is really to align our procedures more closely with the borough procedures on elections, because we're we won't be using state equipment anymore. We'll be using borough equipment. And as you recall, at our last meeting, July 7th, we unanimously passed Resolution 2021-46, adopting the joint resolution of the Borough Assembly and the cities of Homer, Kenai, Seldovia, Seward, and Soldotna for the purposes of intergovernmental administration of borough and city elections. And that's also, again, because we would be using borough equipment and everything, and so there are topics here and that the borough will be addressing that are of interest to the public and our voters. And for an example, the borough's canvas board will be the body that will be testing the equipment that will be used, actually used for the voting. And the borough is going to enact ordinances to establish borough policies for security and logic and accuracy testing and everything. So people will want to pay attention to that. This ordinance, the clerk has really written an excellent summary and sectional analysis on pages 71 through 78 of this packet that the public and voters may be interested in. Briefly summarizing, it adds some new procedures to code. It puts in code several past practices, and those past practices will be continuing, and they'll be used, in this coming election, because this code wouldn't take effect until next January if it passes. It also restates charter provisions. It restates some of current code. There's a lot of it is newly spelled out or stated expressly in our code now, where previously we just incorporated by reference other law. So it's more like, so people can follow instead of having to look at other code, and a lot of that, and there's still some incorporation of state law, but much less. And there's some new code that on items like that you'll want to look at on voter qualifications, rules for determining residence of voters, review of candidate qualifications for any of you that are interested in running for office, ballot shortage, ballot box security, and stuff like that. And some of it is similar to our existing code. Like, for example, a Chapter 630 on absentee voting is very similar to what we have now. When I talked about doing this at the first meeting in July, I recognized that there would be a process to this because it is a real replacement, and the outcome that I would like to see is that. Whatever, and council may have some amendments or things that they would like to see or whatever, but hopefully the goal would be to come to some kind of consensus, because I think, we do have to move forward because of the change and the alignment with the borough in a lot of ways. My hope is that the council will go through a process where they're they feel comfortable with what the outcome is, which will give our public, more, comfort with it too. And then, of course, by having a work session, we can have more public input. And then by having another public hearing, we can have, more public input. So we can come up with a product that everybody's, comfortable with going forward. And the intent of this is not to, make it difficult for people to vote or suppress vote or anything like that. It's more like, again, to put in code things that we're already doing, put in code some things that we'll need to do because of the changes coming forward, and make things more clear, especially with things like poll watchers and stuff like that. So that's another provision that you want to look at is the provision on poll watchers and things like that. So, again, I have, I would support, whatever process council feels that we need to do to, move this forward in a way that will come to a successful outcome for all of us and for our voters. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Malloy, in the fourth whereas, there's a space there. Was there an amendment that needs to be made to fill that space?
Yes,
And would you like to do, was that something that we could do now for housekeeping? Or?
yeah, so that would be maybe the only amendment that I would offer tonight. And I think it's and I lost sight of that. Let me see if I can find that. Okay. So it would be to move to insert the word authorized, and let me find and this would be the page, let's see, ordinance number 3. So this would be on page 28. Thank you, Councilmember Petty. It would be in the fourth whereas, to insert the word authorized. Whereas at the July, and I talked about that, yeah.
Yep.
So whereas at the July 7th, 2021 meeting, the city council moved to amend to add the word authorized the city manager to enter into a memorandum of agreement for intergovernmental administration of KPB and city municipal elections, and.
Second and request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, that amendment is approved. Well, any other Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I, too, agree that this needs a public hearing, work session, and I have a request that may impact the timeline, but I would like our city attorney to help us with a sectional analysis. We have the existing code, we have the new code, and perhaps he could align us with maybe the sections that no longer exist or sections that are brand new, perhaps redlining certain things that would change in the new ordinance, much as we did with the harbor ordinance here in the recent past. I thought that was an excellent effort and was able to facilitate a thorough discussion on the matter. A question for the attorney, I guess. Is that okay with you?
Yes, he said he's jotting it down and will provide that to us.
Okay, and then that will be the kickoff then for our next public hearing discussions. This process.
Yes,
his timeline.
that would be part of the packet. Yeah,
His timeline.
Mr. Bloom. First of all, I guess my question maybe to Vice Mayor Malloy, would it be appropriate for you? Would you envision doing a work session and then another public hearing? So work session next.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the ordinance would have to come back after public hearing, and there may or may not be some amendments that council members want. So yeah, I think that would certainly be appropriate.
I just want to clarify that with you.
You bet.
Well, let's go around the horn. I guess, what kind of time frame would you be looking at, Mr. Bloom, to come back with a sort of revised red line
I could probably have it done by the next council meeting. I think the only time-sensitive issue on this, since it's not due until January, or wouldn't be effective until January next year, would be sort of an October deadline for Mr. Malloy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, under our rules, it would have to be voted up or down on the second meeting of October at the latest, or it falls off the table and you have to start all over. And if I may just briefly.
Yes.
I think Councilmember Glenning's idea is a good idea, and so I'm seeing it as kind of a table, like, old code, new code, or whatever, but, whatever the attorney thinks.
Yeah, and that was actually on my radar too, was to bring that down as a existing code and just section by section how that, so you have a reference to, instead of having to peel back and forth between the repealed and what we're looking at enacting. So, so we'll just kind of tuck that in our little, the date that he can get it done by, which would be the 18th. But let's continue discussing the, Councilmember Winger.
Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Malloy for working on this housekeeping. I did have some concerns about navigating, so a write-up, the new, the old, changes in language would be very helpful in this. I look forward to a work session where we can maybe amend things, so we're not stuck here for 8 or 9 hours on one issue. We can kind of get this all hashed out in that work session. I think there'd be a lot of benefit to make sure we're thoroughly doing this, and in the current situation with a lot of people having a work session on this, so more public comment and input on this might be key with our constituents as well. So thank you.
Any further discussion on the ordinance before we schedule a work session? I guess, or someone makes a motion that we have a work session. Seeing none, Vice Mayor Malloy, would you like to?
I'm sorry, I thought Councilmember Next did you.
I was going to say something, but
Oh, I didn't see your light on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh,
I need to get that in front of.
okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, some of the discussion, I wanted to thank our clerk for the analysis that she did put together, because I found that quite helpful when I went through the packet here. And a lot of the changes are very minor, and I think that anything of great substance is it's pretty limited. So I wouldn't think that hopefully the work session wouldn't be too lengthy. And, I mean, I kind of like having work sessions the hour before, if that would be enough time, before the next meeting, say, if Mr. Bloom thinks he can do that. And if he can't, then perhaps the hour before the following meeting, to kind of keep on our time frame.
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you. I can have it done by the next meeting. I'm not sure I can have it done by the next packet deadline. Because I'm going to Fairbanks for a soccer tournament tomorrow and Friday. So that would really only give me a few days in next week, and I still have 3 Board of Adjustment decisions that I'm working on. I'll add, I guess what I would propose is to add what the clerk did as far as a sectional analysis. Okay.
So with the first meeting in September, would that work, Mr. Bloom? That'd be September 1st.
Absolutely, I can get it done by for the September 1st meeting.
Okay. So, I see lights are going off everywhere here. Councilman Winger?
I get the conveniency of doing the work session ahead of the meeting. I don't feel an hour would be adequate. If we expect a great turnout from the public, we want to give them adequate time to speak on this. So I would think that we'd need at least a minimal of 2 hours so that we can have adequate input from our constituents.
Councilmember Petty?
So I make a motion to have the work session at 4 o'clock beginning on September the 1st.
Second.
No, I can get my memo done in the packet for the September
For the
1st
September
meeting.
1st meeting, that
Yep.
would be in that packet.
So, second.
So could you restate the motion again, Ms. Petty?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to have a work session begin at 4 o'clock on September the 1st before our council meeting for this ordinance 3224-2021.
Second?
Any discussion on the motion?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Any objection? Vice Mayor Malloy?
No objection.
Okay.
Then I was going to just bring up the issue of when to bring it back to the city council on the agenda for a second public
Very
hearing.
good. So seeing no objection to the work session, well, that'll be on at 4 PM on the September 1st prior to our council meeting. Ms. Hines,
Thank you. The work session will be at 4 PM on the 1st.
the first.
When is the public hearing? Is that also going to be on?
So
the
That's
first?
what we're gonna be working on
I was going to
next.
make a,
Yeah,
Got
Vice
it.
Mayor.
Go
gonna
ahead.
make a-
Sorry.
it seems to me that it would, well, I would move to have the ordinance number 3224-2021 on the agenda of the second meeting of the second meeting in September. So that would be my motion.
I'll second.
Would it be on the consent agenda on the 1st?
No, it's already, it would be, this would be for public hearing.
continuation,
I
yeah.
hope I said for public hearing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Second public hearing on the second meeting of September.
right. And so, if I may speak.
Yes.
So then if there's changes that are outcome of the work session, there could be a substitute or whatever, so there's time to do that. That's the rationale.
Any discussion on the motion to move the second public hearing to the second meeting in September?
Request unanimous
Thank
consent.
you. Unanimous consent was requested. Councilmember Winger?
Thank Bob for working with us on that work session.
Okay. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion is approved, and that'll be on several action items regarding ordinance number 3224-21 in the future here. Next up, we have item D5, resolution number 2021-53, authorizing the city manager to execute a memorandum of agreement with the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for design, construction, and maintenance of the Kenai Bridge Access Road Pathway Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to adopt Resolution 2021-53.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-53? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Winger.
Yes, I look forward to the completion of this project, and hopefully we'd be able to get our bike path certified for the Kenai River Marathon run. I know our course was certified and part of the Boston Run. There were people that came from all over to do that marathon. I understand with the construction, it's no longer a certified course. So I would hope that upon completion, we'd be able to get that certification done. I heard it was a lengthy process. And I would just like to make sure that that's something that we're on top of right away.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the resolution 2021? Oh, you want to respond to that, Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to say I discussed the agreement with Councilmember Naxted earlier today, and he had a suggestion that I actually already reached out to DOT and did get some additional language added to this agreement on Section 3 under Planning, Design, and Construction. We're going to be adding language that states that the city reviews the design documentation at the 35% and 65% completion. So we'll have an opportunity to do that, both those. And I already talked to DOT today, and they said they were good with that language change. I just wanted to let council know that there was going to be a slight difference favorable to the city that's going to be added to the agreement.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Naxton.
Want to thank Paul for doing that. It was kind of light speed considering working with the state, and that was, what, 2 o'clock this afternoon? So, very good. I too am really excited about the prospects of having this pathway built, and I'm a bicycler, and that is the most difficult portion of the loop, living on Beaver Loop if I take bridge access or Beaver Loop now, and then along Spur Highway, I got to contend with that whole area right there. And I think a lot of folks will be utilizing it as these pathways come to be. They get used quite a bit. I still think, though it's a moot point, that the city would probably do a quicker, cheaper, and faster job having it designed. The talent is here to do the design and the construction and the management of the construction. But I think DOT has the big stick here, so we're kind of stuck with it. And well, this is our only way to move forward. So I'll be supporting the resolution.
Any further discussion? Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm going to just chime in here with some backstory. I recall when this item was first brought up, we had people from the biking community testify very favorably for this, and actually brought it to our attention that this was necessary. And I recall from another meeting, even representatives from the fish processing community thought that this bike path would be a good idea. It would enhance the vibrancy of the area, and I think they were maybe forward-leaning and looking to the time when something like this would really be a genuine part of our fabric of our town, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I do have a question for Paul. So one of the things that happened over on Beaver Loop was the project was substantially complete, and then there was a few punch list items that they decided to sort of hold over through the winter and give us a chance to add to that before we accepted. As far as us accepting the final project, is there any sort of warranty for this, or is it as is once we take over on it? Because I know on the one on Beaver Loop, the bike path especially, there were some issues with the surface, the pavement surface, with them running a track vehicle on there when the pavement was still a little tender.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I would expect the process to be almost identical to Beaver Loop as far as us signing off on the agreement, on the completed project. There is some language in here under the indemnification clause that does talk about any action that occurs more than 6 years after the city assumes maintenance duties, that there is still some liability on the part of the state. That's not specifically a warranty, but it does protect the city for a period of years after, if there's negligence on the part of the state.
Thank you. Any further discussion on resolution number 2021-53? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger. Yes. Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next up, council, we have item G2, action approval, purchase orders over $15,000. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes. I have a question regarding the Divining Point LLC marketing services, and I see the number just $98,000 for this amount of time. I would ask the city manager perhaps to remind us what their program is, how it's going to be developed, what are the deliverables for their development, and how is it going to be different than what we have now? Those are my initial questions.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. So the 98,050 was authorized by council in the budget. So this is the PO that matches that amount. Scope of work is still being developed. I can bring that to the council once it's completely developed, if you'd like to see it. What I would anticipate, and similar to what we had talked about during the budget presentation, was the efforts that that the Divining Point provided on behalf of the city last year, particularly the advertising efforts in other parts of the country, primarily on the West Coast. Most of the additional money that would be budgeted this year would look to extend that program beyond. There's an inherent cost with an advertising effort like that, and if you want to increase your reach to a larger audience, there's going to be additional costs associated with that. So I would anticipate that's going to be the majority of the change, is just an increased reach, increased costs associated with that advertising. But I'm more than happy to bring that entire scope of work to council once it's been finalized.
That would be very helpful. Would we have a presentation from the contractor, or we just rely on in-house?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. I talked to Divining Point. They were actually in town here last week, I believe, and I think they're going to present in September to the council. I can't remember the exact date, but yeah, you can anticipate a presentation from the consultant, I would say at least twice in the course of the fiscal year, to provide you with an update on what progress has been made, some of the additional ads that have been created, some of the additional videos that have been created, that sort of thing. So I think it was September was when they were planning on coming again, but again, I can't tell you the exact date.
And then that would reveal the program, excuse me, that would reveal the program for the year 22 then, for our upcoming tourist season.
Mr. Ostrander?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, the scope of work I can provide you prior to then, assuming it's done by August 18th, I can provide you that then. When Divining Point comes and presents, they're really just going to be giving you an update on their progress and what they've been accomplishing to that date. So it sounds like you're expecting them to provide you with an idea of what their scope is.
Well, in the past, they've testified before us. They've been here in person, and we had a Zoom meeting last year. I just didn't know what our expectations were.
You can expect more of the same.
Zoom and in person? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes, Mr. Ostrander, I too would appreciate the full scope of what our marketing plan will be. What all is involved. I know we're currently marketing our beaches that they've been marketing. I do have a little concern when it comes to that, so I would like to see the full scope of their proposed marketing.
Through the mayor,
Mr. Ostrander?
Councilmember, I'm happy to provide it.
Any other discussion on item G2?
So,
Vice Mayor Malloy?
thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I would make a motion to approve if there's been no motion. Okay, so I would move to approve purchase orders over $15,000.
Second, request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, purchase orders over $15,000 are approved. Next up, we have item G12. Action approval, assignment, and assumption of lease agreement between Hillcorp Alaska LLC to Kena Beluga Pipeline LLC. Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the assignment and assumption of lease agreement from Hillcorp Alaska LLC to Kenai Beluga Pipeline LLC.
Second.
Is there any discussion on this action approval?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there an objection? Seeing none, the assignment and assumption of lease agreement from Hillcorp Alaska LLC to Kenai Beluga Pipeline LLC is approved. Next up, we have commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Council on Aging met on July the 8th. There was discussion about changing the name of Council on Aging, and after much discussion, it was determined and voted upon to keep the name the same. So we'll be still having Council on Aging. Also brought up for a discussion was to change the time of the meeting from 4:30 to 3:30. However, it was shared with us by the clerk that it needed to have a public hearing. And so they're putting all that together and making everything in proper order so as to make a request to change the Council on Aging from 4:30 to 3:30 on the second Thursday of the month. And that ends my report. Thank you so very much.
Airport Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Airport Commission canceled its meeting this month, and will have their next meeting on the 9th of September.
And since this may be the appropriate place for this, but the dedication of the terminal this Friday at noon? Noon to 1:30, yep. Yes.
Yeah, and the airport is a federally funded airport, so there's certain mask requirements when you're not in the restaurant or the bar or whatever, right? All right, so at least bring it with you.
Right. Harbor Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Harbor Commission did not, their meeting for next Monday, August 9, is canceled for lack of agenda items. They may have a special meeting August 12th on the subject matter of our work session this evening. But that's, well, the clerk will let the commission and me know if that happens.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our meeting for tomorrow was canceled due to a lack of agenda items, but we do have the upcoming garden tour with Parks and Rec and Beautification, and I believe I have that for August 10th at 6 p.m.
Yeah, and I think Ms. Hines put out a invite to the council. I think I remember getting one on that.
Yes.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have two meetings to report. On July the 14th, Planning and Zoning met in regular session and passed unanimously an application for a variance permit for a rear yard setback on a one-story building described as Lot 5, Block 3, Deepwood Park subdivision. We passed unanimously the special use permit, the Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center for Moose Meat John. Passed unanimously a recommendation for ordinance 322-201 determining that real property described as airport land located outside the airport reserve is not needed for public service and authorize the sale of property to Schilling Rentals. Same with action approval recommendations for ordinance number 3221, 2021. This property is not needed for public service and authorizing a sale of the property to Schilling Rentals. Now going to the meeting of the 28th. We had a preliminary subdivision plat for Black Gold Estates replat submitted by McLean Consulting on behalf of Alex Delfit, and that was passed unanimously. There was a public hearing regarding an application for the rezoning of a tract of land described as north 100 feet of Government Lot 34, Section 6, Township 5, North, Range 11 West, fronting the Kenai Spur Highway. And the rezone was from suburban residential to general commercial. This application was submitted by the majority property owner, the Kenaitze Tribe of Kenai. That passed unanimously. There was an action approval regarding a letter of non-objection to the time extension for the finalization of plat of Keys Turn subdivision. The extension to February 11th of 23 per the Borough Code was passed unanimously by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We alerted the Planning and Zoning Commission to the work session and also the Moose Meat John consideration, the 100 Trading Bay property and the Hillcorp assignment. The next meeting will be August the 11th. There'll be a plat, and there'll be a discussion or a notification, perhaps even an action regarding an airport property development. And just a question for the Planning and Zoning Director. On the 11th, there will be a discussion or a review of what was discussed in the work session tonight regarding waterfront development. A question, anyway.
Mr. Foster?
Thank you, Mayor Gable and fellow council members. Yes, Councilmember Glendinning, certainly we can add that to the discussion on the agenda on August 11th. Happy to
Thank
do
you.
so.
That'd be most welcome. It's important they have their oar in the water since Title 29 suggests they do. Good job. Thank you. That ends my report.
Thank you. Beautification Committee.
Our next meeting is September 14th at 6 o'clock here in Chambers. And as Councilmember Winger stated, also we have the beautification with planning with Parks and Rec, the Tourist Cities Gardens at 6 o'clock.
Thank you. Under Mini Grant Steering Committee, there is no report. Under report of the mayor, I don't have a whole lot here this evening. I just wanted to thank everybody who showed up for the work session, the waterfront revitalization. I thought it was a very good discussion. Obviously, maybe we should allot it a little more time, but that's okay. Got some really good ideas, some good comment, and look forward to seeing that go through the process. Also want to thank Vice Mayor Malloy. He covered an event for me last week. It was like the one day I couldn't make it, and that's the day they scheduled it. But it was a recognition of our squirt, KPHA squirt hockey team that won state tournament. I think Mr. Representative Gillum was there, and I'm sure Vice Mayor Malloy will probably speak to it during his comments. But I just want to thank him for covering me once again, which he's doing a very good job at. And just the last thing I just want to close on is, COVID cases are increasing here in the local area, so just ask everybody to at least go back to sterilizing, sterilizing your hands, washing your hands often, and being, on guard as far as just personal hygiene. And with that, I will turn it over to administration reports. City Manager, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So the personal use fishery this year obviously ended last week, but it went smoothly for the most part. We had good participation this year, although when you compare it to 2020, which was surprisingly strong in the middle of COVID, revenues were down about 12.5% over last year, but they're still up 10% over the year before. So we're a little bit below budgeted levels for 2021. But I think overall it's going to take very little of our personal use fishery fund balance to cover the overage. The DipNet report, we'll start working on that. We have to have some of our post-DipNet meetings internally. We'll publish that in the same general time frame that we normally do, October, November time frame. You should see that published. I'm happy to announce that we have hired a grant writer in the city. Riley Shirtliff has accepted the position. Yesterday he accepted it. He's had excellent success in the past securing grants for Cooper Landing Emergency Services, who he's actually the chief for Cooper Landing Emergency Services. That's a part-time position. He's going to work at our position 20 hours a week as well, so he's going to do both jobs. As council likely does recall, this is a 20-hour week position. It was budgeted for the full fiscal year of '22. I do think that there's going to be a tremendous number of opportunities over the next 6 to 8 months with all the federal money as it continues to be released for the city to take advantage of this with this new grant writer. So we're really excited to have Riley on board. As Mayor Gabriel said, COVID numbers are up considerably. No changes planned for mitigation in city facilities or changes to the way that we're functioning in city facilities at this time. We do have 5 employees that are out that are currently COVID positive. That's a higher level than we've had to date, but we're just going to continue to monitor over the next several weeks. You know, we're certainly hopeful that we don't have to make any operational changes in any of the facilities in the city, but again, we're just going to continue to monitor that, track those numbers, and see what they indicate. Also, again, as Mayor Gabriel said, ribbon cutting at the airport, finally. We were hoping to have that at least a year ago, but it is Friday, noon to 1:30. I hope all council members can be there. It'd be great to have you. I'm excited to finally to have that event. And lastly, and of course never least, is Bluff Project. You know, things are starting to become a little real on the Bluff Project. As you know, we're under contract with HDR for the design. They've been primarily collecting archive data. There's an enormous amount of study that you can do over the course of 35 to 40 years, and they're filtering through all that, figuring out what new information still needs to be obtained. The field work that is going to be obtaining that information, which is going to be primarily geotechnical, hydrologic, and land surveying, will likely begin later this month. It appears that there's an excellent opportunity for the city to receive money for not only the design but also for construction of the for the structure over the next several months. The infrastructure bill that's working its way through Congress right now, that's supposed to hit the president's desk sometime in September, provides a significant amount of money to support coastal erosion projects, which ours, of course, is one of those. And that's what I mean when this becomes real. So now we realize that this thing likely is going to really happen. So administration needs to double our efforts on determining how exactly we're going to schedule and structure the match that's going to be necessary for the city. Depending on the total cost of this project, that match could be significant. The new grant writer is fortuitous and timely, and that I think that's going to be his number one priority, is trying to determine, are there ways that we can get grant funds to fill that match? As you know, there's also the possibility that the city will have to bond for that, which would require that there be a ballot proposition at either a general election or at a special election, depending on how timing works. But with funding potentially coming in the next couple of months, and again, there's no certainty here, but things seem to be aligning well for that to be a real possibility. From a timing perspective, once those monies are received, we're going to have to determine how exactly to approach this to make sure that we can fill that match amount when the time comes. So much more to come on it, but if you would have asked me 6 months ago if we would have been in a position to receive the entire up to $27 million by September of this year, I wouldn't have believed it. But now it does appear that there's a real possibility that could happen. So that's the end of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. City Manager Ostrander, could you help me understand what ARPA funds are, which is current legislation, and the potential of the infrastructure bill that is out there now, and how that would impact for the benefit of the city of Kenai? Is there an overlap of focus, or are they separate programs? Or I'll listen.
Mr. Ostrander.
So American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, And just to make sure I understand the question, so you're asking how those funds could be utilized for infrastructure in the city, or are you talking specifically to support the Bluff project?
Infrastructure in the city for the ARPA funds, I understand that could be used for water and sewer, those type of utilities, our water gathering system, and that also may be considered infrastructure under the infrastructure bill. I was just wondering how we can leverage that to our advantage.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendening. So the infrastructure bill that's making its way through Congress is separate from the ARPA funds. The infrastructure bill, again, that's going to go in front of the president hopefully in September, could potentially provide money for infrastructure for city projects. I don't know with certainty if that's going to be something that's available for municipalities at this point. The ARPA funds can be utilized for a couple of different types of infrastructure. Water and sewer is one of them, and the other is broadband. For the city, water and sewer is the most direct application. I will say that one of the things that we've discussed internally as far as water and sewer infrastructure projects utilizing ARPA funds, I think that it's important that they're used on projects that will benefit all of the taxpayers within the city. So not only utility members. There's only a portion of our residents that are actually members of the utility. So if we were to utilize those funds to provide upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant or the water treatment plant, I would argue that those would benefit only the members of the utility. So as we're looking at possible infrastructure projects, water and sewer, utilizing the ARPA funds, we want to make sure it's something that would provide a larger economic benefit or job growth or something like that that would benefit the whole of the all of the residents of the city rather than just members of the utility. But that is one of the areas that the ARPA funds, that the federal guidance is clear, that water and sewer infrastructure projects are an applicable expense.
Just a thought, as you were explaining, there's one aspect of our water utility that does benefit all the citizens, and those are the fire hydrants, that distribution system. And if some capacity could be added to the water system that we share with the hydrants, that might be a means of satisfying both demands, both desires.
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendening, that again, I think I would argue that the fire hydrants only serve a portion of our residents. There's many residents that do not have fire hydrants in their area because they don't have water available in their area. So they are simply outside the area that the utility provides service.
But yet we have fire protection and the water has to be transported from some source to them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's my point.
Councilmember Winger.
Yes. Mr. Ostrander, I just wanted to say thank you for giving your report about hiring the grant writer. I think that's really exciting. I fielded some recent calls and explained to a constituent how important filling this position is and the opportunities it would allow for our city if we were able to obtain grants. So I just want to say that's exciting and welcome to Riley. And then I had made a call a couple months ago about the city lights being on. We have a series of lights that were supposed to be fixed that have been running 24 hours a day since well before like March. Those lights haven't been fixed and are still currently running. Do we have a time frame on when those will be fixed? Will it be before daylight savings time hits again?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Winger, I know, I talked to my Public Works Director, Mr. Curtin, about that multiple times, and he did do an audit of those lights. I'd have to get an update from him as to when the timeline would be to get those fixed. So I'll have to get you an update on that at a later time.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question, I don't know if this would be for you or Ms. Hines. The cemetery phase 2, we were supposed to get fencing this summer, and there's been nothing done further with that project. And, you know, we just got it out of a pandemic. We told there would be thousands of people. I believe we heard we had 4 plots left. but nothing additional has been done with the cemetery project. Can you let us know where that's at and when we can expect the continuing of that project?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. I actually did talk to Mr. Curtin about this yesterday or the day before. His plans are still to get the fencing up this year, but he did tell me that completion would not occur during this summer, so it's going to be completion next year. And I did stress to him the fact that there's very few plots left in the existing cemetery, and he understands the importance of that. The project is taking longer than it should have, and I think this is part of a larger issue that I know council is aware of, and the reason why we brought on a capital projects manager, because we are not getting capital projects done in a timely manner, and that needs to change. We need to get things done. We've got millions of dollars of money that's been appropriated by council that has not been spent, and the cemetery is one of those examples.
Thank you. And one last one. Is there a rhyme or reason for how we're removing spruce bark beetle trees from properties? I've noticed we've been in the cemetery 3 separate times removing trees. Is there a reason why we just haven't got all the trees and moved on to the next property? Why we're coming back? Because it does tear up the grounds and stuff in there, coming and going in and out. And we were just wondering if they were just going to hit it, get them all down, and move on instead of coming back and forth.
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Winger. So I do know in the case of the cemetery, they went in there earlier this year, and they got partway in, and it did really tear things up because the ground was still wet at the time. So they left knowing that they'd have to come back in that case. So that, in the case of the cemetery, they were planning on clearing all the trees, but because the ground was still too wet, they had to come back later during the year. As far as other spruce bark beetle removal within the city, the thing that we're focused on right now are really hazard trees, trees that present present or near future danger to either structures, and it can be public structure, private structure, doesn't really matter, but those hazard trees are the ones that we're really focused on now. And we are now that DipNet is over, we are turning our focus on a concerted effort to remove as many of those hazard trees as we can with our crews.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Ostrander? Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes. Circling back for some of the memos that City Manager Ostrander sent us, he touched upon the topic of the City of Kenai seat on the Borough Planning Commission. There's been some movement on that. Is there anything definitive, or is it still an evolving situation?
Mr. Ostrander?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendenning. It's very much an evolving situation. And we could talk about this for a long time because there's a lot going on. But so what's occurred is that the city of Soldotna had lost their planning commission seat last year, so they're due for their seat to come back on. And they forwarded a name to the mayor, and the mayor did not move that name onto the assembly for consideration. So the borough has now changed their policy on how these planning commissioners are chosen. Historically, when a city wanted to appoint a commissioner, the city council, the city would advertise for the opening. The city council would consider the applications, and then they would forward that list to the borough mayor for their consideration. The way the new policy is now is that the city no longer advertises. The borough is going to advertise. The mayor is going to put together a list and send it to the council, and then the council gets to choose from that list who the mayor is then going to choose. As you can imagine, Soldotna is in the middle of this, and that didn't sit very well with Soldotna. And there's been multiple meetings with city managers talking about this, and Soldotna is pushing back right now. There is an ordinance that is supposed to be introduced to the assembly that will codify that policy. I haven't brought it forward to council yet because I thought it was potentially premature, but if that ordinance does get introduced, I think that we should speak against it strongly. The other caveat in here too is that not only is the borough advertising for the position, when it's a city position, they're specifically stating that anyone from the borough can apply for that city position. So there are multiple things that need to be looked at here that I think that the city is going to have issues with. The other thing that is being discussed is the possibility of moving from Planning Commission was 13 members back in 2015. It moved to 11 in 2016. And when it moved to 11, as you know, there's now a rotation, a borough policy that rotates it. So each of the 5 municipalities in the borough, Seldovia, Soldotna, Kenai, Homer, and Seward, lose their seat once every 5 years. It's something that I know that council is not supportive of us losing that seat. There's been discussion to move back to 13 with the idea that that would resolve that and the cities could retain their seats. All 5 municipalities could retain their seats. However, because those seats are assigned proportionally based on population, going to 13 doesn't solve it either. We would still lose a seat as a municipality. They would have to increase the Planning Commission to 15 to allow each of the cities to have 1 seat proportioned on population. So there's another issue there that needs to be looked at and addressed at some point. I did have a discussion today with several other city managers stating that the city of Kenai was not supportive of losing our seat every 5 years. When you look at our population, we have approximately 15% of the population. There's 11 members on the Planning Commission. That represents about 9% of the population. So we have over the threshold for what would allow us to have a seat. So I think that that's something that we should look at seriously and push back against as well if that policy of rotation continues. As it is now, we would lose our seat next year if that policy remains.
Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, and Title 29 would allow us to take all these obligations on and run our own business.
Yes, it would.
And maybe we could work with Soldotna and have a zone between us and share the responsibility. I am considering it, not seriously, but it's running through my head, and I know others have, and we've talked about it on the periphery here in planning and zoning and perhaps on council. But yeah, this is just too important of an issue, especially Title 29, that a significant portion of the borough, be a municipality or a census area, does not have representation with all of the moving parts that we have that impact the borough and its land use policies, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for keeping us appraised and stiffening our back a little bit. I appreciate it.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll go to city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I have nothing to report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to the city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. The candidate filing period opened on Monday, and we have not had any filed yet at this point. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, I do have one quick one, because I think I already know the answer to this, but just to kind of throw it out there. With ranked choice voting, that's on a statewide basis. Would that affect this code rewrite at all?
I haven't read state law as far as whether it would affect. I think that it might just say that the election director is to make a ballot, and it would be elsewhere in law. But I really haven't done an analysis to see if that is another good reason to stop citing Title 15 in that in our election procedures.
Okay,
And just as an aside, the legislature is continually putting forth fun things like two-factor authentication for voting, which would affect Title 15 and other things, which many reasons to have it be our own we affect for
Okay.
what we want.
okay, thank you. Oh, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Sorry, I forgot to mention one thing that I think is important. On Spruce Bark Beetle, I've been working with the borough and the other municipalities. The borough is going to draft a joint resolution that supports their request, their federal request for $35 million in Spruce Bark Beetle funding. So I've been working with the borough to draft the joint resolution that then would be brought to each one of the cities for their consideration.
Thank you. Any other questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll move to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for council comments. Councilman Raskin.
I don't have anything, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I got an email invite this afternoon from Representative Ben Carpenter from District 29, inviting everyone to Seward to welcome back Lydia Jacob, who took first in her at 17 in the Olympics, got a gold medal and a silver medal. So they are doing that Thursday, August 5th. They're going to do a parade in Seward. It is tomorrow, yes. The last minute invites. It is tomorrow, 6 o'clock for a parade, and then at 7 o'clock, Lydia will arrive in on a boat. People will be able to congratulate her, ask her questions, look at her medal, all those fun things. So if you want to take a day drive down to Seward tomorrow night, have a nice dinner, congratulate her. I know we're all excited to have an Olympian in our presence. I got to watch her swim 2 years ago. There was rumor 2 years ago of watch this girl swim. She's going to go to the Olympics, and she's going to take the Olympics. And she was a joy to watch, and even more of a joy to watch in the Olympics. I just would like to say congratulations to Lydia. I'd like to thank everybody that showed up today for the work session, and hopefully we get a good pour of support in our next work session. And then I'd like to remind everybody that school's returning August 17th. This is the start up for school. So you'll start to see more kids. Take your time. We've just got through dip net season, and the fish are in now. So they waited for us. We've got record fish, and I just would like to remind everybody to be bear responsible. There have been countless bear encounters across our state this summer, so make sure we're properly disposing of them. Make sure when you go out into public wooded areas, bring more than just bells with you. I would just like people to be, they are dinner bells. Be cautious, be careful of your surrounding, keep a clean area, make sure people know your travel plans. As we have seen, bears are hungry. With the fish running in, we might see more encounters. I would just like to encourage everyone to be safe, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just some comments. There was in newspaper reports and on social media some dramatic incidents regarding our PU fishery, vehicles burning on the beach and boats running up on top of one another, and I just wonder if that's something that we can address in our meeting wrap-up for the PU fishery. I know in the past, we've had the Coast Guard down helping us patrol the water, and we do have our own patrol boat, and I know we had a commitment this year to patrol at high usage times, but maybe we could look at that again, and if we have to add a day or two, I believe that would be appropriate for the for the safety of the boaters and the participants. There was a kid that got loose, a trooper jumped in the water and was rescued with a dip net, and that's a pretty close call. It all's well, it ends well, but it's just a reminder that that fishing in the water up to your waist in a current is dangerous, and I just hope that we continue to be mindful of that danger. I got some calls about why are Walmart's shelves bare? You know, is that just seasonal, or is it something that's functional with our Walmart store? And is it something that we could visit with them about? I noticed even in July, the store was already bare before the tourist season even hit. And if there's no stuff on the shelves, it's a loss of tax dollars for us. So if it's a concern of mine, it might be a concern of yours too. Then also, I know we have the dog park initiative going, and donations are coming in, and I would just ask each of us on the city council to donate if we haven't already. That's a necessary project for our city. It's difficult getting the materials for the fences just because of logistics and availability of materials, but it's an issue that we're working through, and I'm sure the dog park people are working hand in glove with you on that, Manager Oster.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yes, I'm so very thankful that we had a successful personal use fishery, and that we were able to host our friends and neighbors from across the state. I did want to recognize the trooper who went into the water. Her name was Laura Reed, to rescue the young man who was going down the river. And then I also wanted to recognize the Good Samaritan, Mr. Aridu, who helped the trooper in helping her and helping the young man, and that all was well. And I do appreciate all of our neighbors who do come down here looking out for one another to help make this personal use fishery a success without any sad stories or sad endings. And so I also wanted to thank the administration and the participation of the public tonight for our work session in having forward long-term thinking for the great development of our lovely town with the great view. And I love the statement about make the right turn to Kenai, because we have the stellar view down here, which is priceless, and we want to share that with our friends and neighbors who have not yet had the chance to enjoy that opportunity. And there's great opportunities yet to come, and I'm very thankful to hear about the bluff erosion and the resources that are coming available, and great things are happening in Kenai. I'm thankful that I can be a small part of that success. That ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I'm unable to attend the ribbon cutting of the airport because I have a scheduling conflict that I can't move. But I think it's fantastic. The completion of that whole project and how well the airport looks and how easier it is for people to use it. Yes, I did have the privilege of covering for Mayor Gabriel for that event by Representative Gillum of the Kenai Peninsula Hockey Association, where he was recognizing the Squirts, the Kenai Squirts, for winning the state championship. And I have to say that the kids loved it. You know, he had a really neat proclamation, and it was pretty big, and he gave one to each of the kids, and they all were holding it and getting pictures with him and everything. And the other thing is the Coach McGlasson, was missing Mayor Gabriel because Mayor Gabriel actually coached him. The other thing that everyone should know is that a lot of the parents, as well as Coach McGlasson, really expressed their appreciation of the council and the administration being able to keep the multi-purpose facility open during the pandemic so that kids could continue to skate in a safe environment there. And so they were really appreciative of that. Yeah, we had a really good work session tonight on Keeter Fight. It was really, we kind of were limited to waterfront revitalization because that's what everyone wanted to talk to. But I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward to the other economic development incentives that administration is working on, because I think those are good things too. Last meeting, early July, I had talked about possibility of bringing forward some resolutions on ballot propositions regarding charter petitions. Decided not to do that. And I appreciate working with the city attorney and the city clerk on that, who did a lot of work. But the idea was simple. It was about enlarging the time for collecting signatures, but kind of some other issues came up. And then I talked to some of my former colleagues that served on the council, and they thought the timing wasn't good, you know, and reminded me that voters don't like ballot propositions. And they reminded me that I had once talked about how we needed to have a charter commission to look at it organically, and you know, and instead of picking and choosing. So they were kind of slapping me around with my own words, you know. So, and then the other thing is what's important is the election code we're working on, and then, you know, that's incorporating the existing charter, and then, you know, we would have a parallel talk about whether we're changing that, and then it would have to amendment later. It'd be too confusing maybe for some people of the public, and the most important thing is to come out with a good product, you know, on the election code generally. However, you know, some other people have been asking me for a while about our conditional use procedures. The timing on that is pretty good, actually, because, you know, we've seen a lot of issues because all of a sudden we had 3 Board of Adjustment appeals and 1 that went away because the applicant withdrew, and we've noticed and discussed in deliberation some issues that we've had with current procedures. So the administration, the planner, and the city attorney and the city clerk, you know, also had some concerns regarding that. So I met with them, and I'm working on a project to bring to council that would make some proposals for changes in procedures to 150, which, you know, on conditional use procedures, like, and so, you know, that'll probably also be, you know, of course, that would be something that the council, after introduction, would send to planning and zoning for comment, and maybe a work session and stuff like that and everything. So it's another multi-meeting project, but I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. So, you know, there wouldn't be a big surprise about that. So I guess I'm still doing some work until I leave you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of cool things are happening right now, you know, and looking forward to the ribbon cutting Friday for the terminal building. Terminal building is, actually I was there for another ribbon cutting. I think that was around 2000, and we had another renovation. But I mean, that terminal building is not our first terminal building. It's been added on to, but the old one still exists. It's I think it's the AMVET building along Spur Highway at the end of the grass strip. That grass strip where we picnic and all that, that used to be the runway way back when. You know, then they moved the runway to where it is now. So for anybody here that likes to go flying in the middle of the night, you're not going to land on our runway in the middle of the night because they're drilling it, coring it for the next 10 days. But there's a gravel strip still there, so you can land on that. But probably isn't affecting anybody here between the hours of 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning, I suppose. But that is another big project, because once they establish what that is, what I'm anticipating is that whole runway is going to be obliterated and gone down, and they're going to come back up. And the asphalt out there is about this thick. I have a core of it at home. It's a great paperweight. Or anything else you want to weight down. But any rate, good things happening at the airport. And then the waterfront meeting that we had this evening, I'm really looking forward to that kind of moving forward. Great news on the bluff erosion project, funding and whatnot, and potential and all of that. But the design on both of those are moving forward, and here we go. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Next up, we have item L1, executive session. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to convene the City Council of City of Kenai to executive session for review and discussion of the terms of employment agreement for the city clerk, which pursuant to AS 4462-310 CT may be a subject, C2, may be a subject that tends to prejudice the reputation and character of the city clerk, and request the attendance of the city clerk and the city attorney as needed.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion on the motion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat,
Yes?
Councilmember Glendenning.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.